Human uses his blood to save he, and got repaid in an incredible way. Blood painted the alien soil of Traxxas in. Arterial sprays of crimson and azure human red meeting Vulpi blue across the battlefield. Combat medic Paul Valerian crawled through mud thick with both his field kit clutched against his chest. The distant crack of pulse rifles and the dull thud of gravity mortars had faded minutes ago, leaving him in eerie silence. Broken only by his labored breathing Sierra squad, this is Valerian. Does anyone copy? Paul's voice cracked through his throat raw from shouting orders during the ambush. Static hissed back through his comm unit. He'd been separated during the chaos when Vulpi forces had struck their forward operating base. The attack had been precise, calculated, nothing like the chaotic skirmishes typical of the fox-like species. They'd known exactly when and where to hit. Paul pulled himself up against the trunk of a massive fern tree, its broad fronds providing momentary cover. A quick assessment confirmed what he already knew. 3 pulse rifle charges left Metacomp at 30% power, and no human life signs on his scanner. He was alone in Vulpi territory, with night approaching. A soft sound, a whimper, barely audible, froze him in place. He drew his sidearm and moved carefully toward a small outcropping of rocks. As he rounded the formation, he discovered the source, a fallen Vulpi soldier, her fur-tipped ears matted with blue blood, her battle armor torn open across the abdomen, a gut wound severe but not immediately fatal. Don't, she gasped when she saw him reaching feebly for her weapon several feet away. Paul held up his hands. I'm a medic. Her amber eyes, vertical pupils dilated with pain, assessed him with intelligence that bellied the propaganda about fox savages he'd been fed. Her lips tinged blue from blood loss, pulled back to reveal sharp canines. Better to die than be captured for interrogation, she managed, wincing as she tried to move away. Paul holstered his weapon and knelt beside her. I don't interrogate, I heal. It's what I do. The Vulpi female's eyes locked onto the medic insignia on his armor. Recognition flickered there, followed by confusion. Why would you help your enemy? Blood bubbled at the corner of her mouth. Paul opened his field kit. Right now, you're not my enemy, you're my patient. A quick scan with his Medicomp confirmed his visual assessment. Internal bleeding, shrapnel embedded in her liver, one of her 2 hearts damaged. The Vulpi had evolved with redundant organs, making them formidable on the battlefield, but also presenting unique challenges. For treatment, his limited supplies weren't designed for Vulpi physiology. What's your name? He asked, buying time. As he sorted through options, her eyes narrowed. You ask the name of your test subject. Paul applied a pressure bandage to stem the external bleeding. I'm Paul Valerian, and you're not a test subject. Something in his tone must have convinced her. Aria, she whispered. Second tactical division. Her breathing grew more labored. The Medac comp beeped a warning. Her secondary heart was failing under the strain of compensating for the damaged primary. Without intervention, she had minutes, not hours. Paul made a decision that violated every protocol in the Federation Medical Corps handbook. He reached into his kit and removed the emergency transfusion equipment designed for human-to-human emergency blood transfer in field conditions. Aria, listen to me. Your body is rejecting the synthetic coagulant. Without intervention, you'll bleed out. Internally, her eyes flickered with understanding and resignation. Our biologies are incompatible, maybe not entirely. Paul rolled up his sleeve, exposing the veins in his arm. There are old stories from the early contact wars, rumored cases of successful emergency transfusions. Aria's eyes widened. Those are myths, propaganda. Maybe. Paul prepped the transfusion line, but right now it's the only chance you've got. Her hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping his wrist. Why risk it? Military will court-martial you if they find out. Paul met her gaze steadily. Because I didn't become a medic to watch people die when I could help them. Aria studied him for a long moment before her hand fell away. Then, I accept your help. Paul Valerian, a ghost of a smile, touched her lips. Perhaps your human blood will taste as strange as you are. Paul calibrated the equipment modifying the filtration settings to accommodate what he knew of Vulpi physiology. The transfusion system hummed. To life drawing his blood through the purifier and into Arya's veins, he'd expected resistance, burning pain some. Sign her body was rejecting the foreign cells. Instead, a curious warmth flowed up. His arm as the first of his blood entered her system. Arya gasped, her back arching slightly as the crimson fluid merged with her azure circulation. Paul felt lightheaded, but not from blood loss, something else, something he couldn't identify, like an electrical current passing between them. Something's happening, Arya whispered, her voice stronger already. I can feel. She stopped, her amber eyes locking with his. I can feel you. Paul was about to respond when a sensation unlike anything he'd experienced flooded his consciousness. Alien emotions, fragments of memories, not his own, the strange dual beat of two hearts, one failing, one strong. What's happening? He managed to ask as the world tilted around him. Arya's eyes were wide with wonder and fear. The old legends, the blood bond, they were true before Paul could question her further. A brilliant light flashed across his vision pane, seared through his veins, radiating from the transfusion site up his arm and into his chest. He heard Arya cry out in unison with his own shout. Then darkness claimed them both. Arya awakened to unfamiliar sensations coursing through her body. Her wounds still pulsed with dull pain, but something else overshadowed the discomfort, a strange warmth flowing through her veins and an awareness that extended beyond her own skin. Her eyes snapped open to find the human medic slumped against the rock wall beside her, the transfusion equipment still connecting them. She yanked the needle from her arm, her instinct screaming danger. The motion jarred Paul. Awake, you, she snarled, scrambling backward despite her injuries. What have you done to me? Paul winced, touching his temple as if in pain. I saved your life. You're welcome. I can feel you, Arya hissed, tapping her chest. In here, your emotions, your presence. This isn't normal. Paul's expression shifted from confusion to shock as understanding dawned. I feel it, too, like an echo of your thoughts. He shook his head. The transfusion must have created some kind of psychic link. Arya's ears flattened against her skull. The blood bond is sacred among my people. A myth, a religious story. It doesn't happen in reality, and it certainly doesn't happen with humans. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Paul moved to help her, and when his hand touched her arm, a jolt of electricity seemed to pass between them. Both gasped, eyes meeting in shared surprise. Your wounds, they're already healing. Paul observed his medical training overriding his shock, where the shrapnel had torn her flesh hours before. New tissue had formed, closing the wounds at an accelerated rate. Arya touched her abdomen in disbelief. This isn't possible. Paul checked his metacomp. Your secondary heart has stabilized, and the primary is showing cellular regeneration. He ran a scan over himself next, and my cellular activity is heightened too. Whatever's happening, it's affecting us both. Arya's ears swiveled suddenly, picking up sounds beyond human range. Someone's coming, multiple footsteps, 300 m east. Paul looked at her in surprise. I don't hear anything. I should be able to hear that far either, she admitted, but I can, moving with unexpected grace despite her injuries. Arya peered out from there. Shelter, human patrol, 8 soldiers, heavy weapons. Paul felt her sudden spike of fear through their connection. They'll detect us soon. They'll kill me and court-martial you for treason. Arya corrected, already gathering what little gear she had. We need to move. Paul packed his medical kit with practiced def efficiency. Can you walk? Arya took a tentative step, then straightened with surprise. Better than I should be able to. They slipped out the back of the small rock formation just as the patrol crested the nearby ridge. Moving through the dense underbrush, Paul found himself navigating the alien terrain with unusual confidence. It was as if he could sense the safest path. It's me, Arya whispered, answering his unspoken question. You're tapping into my knowledge of the terrain. They moved in perfect synchronization, their steps falling into rhythm when Paul's foot slipped on a mossy stone. Arya's hand shot out to steady him before he even began to fall. You anticipated that. Before it happened, Paul noted breathing hard as they ducked under a fallen tree. I felt your balance shift, Arya paused. Listening again, they found our shelter. They're tracking us now, Paul assessed. Their options, we need somewhere to hide. Until nightfall, Arya closed her eyes, accessing what seemed like an internal map. There's an abandoned research station 2 km northwest. The war reached this sector. Months ago, it should be empty. Their newfound connection guided them through the dense forest, alert to dangers. Neither would have detected alone when a camouflage sensor mine lay in their path. Both stopped simultaneously before triggering it. I never would have seen that, Paul admitted. I never would have. Since the electrical signature, Arya countered. The research station appeared. Through the trees, a low bunker-like structure, partially reclaimed by T-axis aggressive vegetation. They approached cautiously, but no signs of life registered on either Paul's scanner or Arya's enhanced senses. Inside, dust covered abandoned equipment and scattered data pads. Paul secured the entrance while Arya checked for secondary exits. Clear, she reported, then swayed. Suddenly, Paul was at her side, instantly steadying her before she felt the contact sent. Another wave of sensation between them, not just the electric jolt from before, but something warmer, more intimate there. Eyes met, and Paul felt her surprise mirrored in his own. What is this, he asked, his voice rough. Arya's pupils dilated, her breathing shallow. The bond is strengthening. She pulled away with obvious effort. The legends say a blood bond creates connection on all levels. Physic, mental, emotional. Paul ran a hand through his hair, disconcerted. So what happens now? Arya's amber eyes studied him with new intensity. Now, we figure out how to survive this war with neither side getting their hands on us. Her ears twitched because if either the Vulpi High Command or your Federation discovers what's happening between us, we'll spend the rest of our lives in a laboratory. Paul felt the truth of her words resonate through their connection. Whatever had happened when his blood flowed into her veins had changed everything. They were no longer merely enemies, no longer simply human. And Vulpi, what they had become, neither of them. New night fell over the abandoned research station as Paul inventoried their meager supplies, his medical kit, Arya's combat rations, a half-charged pulse pistol, and whatever they could salvage from the station itself. Not enough to survive long in a war zone. What it would have to do. Arya paced the small control room, her movements betraying a nervous energy that contradicted her outward calm. Through their growing connection, Paul sensed her inner turmoil, fear, confusion, and something else, curiosity. You should rest, Paul said, looking up from his inventory. Your body's healing quickly, but it still needs recovery time. Arya's ears twitched. I can't rest, not with you in my head. Paul leaned against the dusty console. I didn't exactly plan this, you know. I was trying to save your life by violating the most basic biological protocols. Arya stopped packing to face him. Even junior medics, no cross-species transfusions are forbidden. Protocols don't mean much when someone's bleeding out in front of you, Paul replied, a flash of his battlefield experiences bleeding through their connection. Arya flinched as images flashed between them. Human soldiers dying under Paul's hands, the weight of lives he couldn't save. She hadn't expected such humanity from the enemy. Her expression softened slightly. You've lost many, too many. Paul looked away. Human Vulpi dead is dead. I just wanted one fewer body on my conscience. Silence fell between them, charged with unspoken understanding. The Vulpi have a saying. Arya finally offered, her voice softer than before. Blood carries memory. Our scientists dismissed it as superstition, but our elders insisted that blood contains more than just cells and plasma. It carries the essence of a person. Paul considered this. Human medicine has observed psychological changes in some transfusion recipients, preferences, dreams that seem to belong to the donor. This is more than borrowed preferences, Arya said, gesturing between them. The blood bond is sacred to my people. It's part of our oldest traditions, from before we took to the stars. Paul's scientific curiosity engaged. How does it work traditionally? Arya hesitated, then sat across from him. It was a ritual between warriors, a sharing of strength. The legends say those who formed the bond could fight as one, anticipate each other's moves, share skills like we're experiencing now. Paul noted yes, but Arya's ears flattened. It was only ever between Volpe. The text specifically warned against bonding with other species. Why the texts weren't specific? Just warnings of transformation and becoming something new. Her amber eyes studied him intently. What do your scientists say about human-Volpe biological compatibility? Paul accessed his medical training. Enough similarities for basic comparisons. Too many differences for integration. Our proteins should reject each other, not merge. He flexed his hand, feeling new strength there. Yet here we are. A distant explosion rattled the windows, reminding them of the war raging across Traxxas. Arya moved to the observation port, her enhanced night vision scanning the horizon. Federation forces pushing east. She reported 3 clicks away and moving parallel to us. Paul joined her at the window, unconsciously standing close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. How can you tell they're Federation, not Volpe? Attack pattern. Volpe strike quickly and withdraw. Your people prefer sustained assault. She glanced at him. Each approach has merits the simple acknowledgement of tactical respect. Surprised Paul, the connection between them was eroding. Years of propaganda and conditioning. What's your role in all this? He asked. Before you were a wounded soldier in my path. Arya's posture straightened with pride. Scout Specialist, 2nd Tactical Division. I was mapping Federation movements when we encountered your patrol. Her ears drooped slightly. My team, did they survive? Paul searched his memories. I don't know. The attack was chaotic. A pulse of grief flowed through their connection, and without thinking, Paul placed his hand on her shoulder. The contact intensified their bond instantly, and Arya's emotions flooded him. Concern for her squadmates, loss of many friends, to the war determination to protect her home world. Simultaneously, his emotions transferred to her, his weariness with death, doubt about the war's purpose, the driving need to heal rather than harm. They broke contact, both breathing heavily from the intensity of the exchange. Your people aren't what our military tells us, Arya admitted quietly. Neither are yours, Paul responded. A sudden crash from the lower level of the station interrupted their moment of understanding. Both tensed automatically, moving into defensive positions on either side of the doorway. No words needed. Their shared awareness coordinated their response. Paul felt a spike of adrenaline that wasn't his own. As Arya detected movement below, she signaled silently. 3 signatures. Non-human. Paul's hand moved to his side, then froze as Arya's knowledge flowed to him. Not soldiers, predators. TX's spine. Wolves, apex hunters drawn to the station by their scent. The first creature leapt through the doorway, a blur of teeth and claws that would have torn Paul's throat out if he hadn't already been moving aside. With Volpe-like reflexes, Arya's pulse pistol fired twice, catching the creature mid-leap, but the shots only enraged it. The second and third wolves charged in, separating them. Paul found himself moving with unprecedented speed, ducking under slashing claws and striking with precision at vulnerable points. He somehow knew instinctively across the room Arya fought with similar enhanced ability, incorporating techniques from human combat training. She'd never learned. They moved in perfect synchronization, covering each other's vulnerabilities, anticipating each attack before it came. When the last spine wolf fell, they stood panting in the center of the room, adrenaline still coursing through them. That was Paul began. I know. Arya finished, eyes wide with realization. I fought using your techniques, and I used yours. Paul looked down at his hands. The blood bond, it's not just sharing sensations, we're sharing skills, muscle memory. Arya stepped closer, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. This goes beyond all the legends. The bond is stronger than anything recorded in our histories. As they stood amid the aftermath of battle, something shifted between them, the adrenaline, the shared victory, the growing intimacy of minds. Becoming familiar with each other, Paul found himself noticing details he'd overlooked before. The gold flecks in her Amber eyes the graceful curve of her ears, the strength evident in her lith. Formed through their connection, he felt her awareness of him sharpening too. Appreciation of his steady hands, the intelligence behind his eyes, the controlled power in his movements. Arya broke the charged silence. First, we should secure the perimeter. Where there are 3 spine wolves, there may be more. Paul nodded, grateful for the distraction from feelings. Neither of them was ready to acknowledge whatever was happening between them was unprecedented, dangerous, and growing stronger. By the hour, dawn broke over the research station. As Paul salvaged a communications array from the abandoned equipment, Arya watched him work, fascinated by the fluidity with which his fingers manipulated the delicate components, a skill she could now partially access through their bond. If I can isolate the Federation emergency channel, we might learn what's happening in the sector, Paul explained, making a final connection. The comm unit crackled to life, voices filtering through static. Paul adjusted the frequency, and suddenly, transmission filled the room. Priority Alpha subject is combat medic Paul Valerian, last seen in Sector 7. Intelligence suggests possible contact with Volpe forces. Subject possesses genetic anomaly critical to project. Chimera capture alive at all costs. Repeat, genetic anomaly is the target. Paul's hands froze on the controls as the transmission continued. Secondary intelligence indicates possible cross-contamination event. If confirmed, both human subject and any Volpe contact must be secured for immediate transport to Colonel Harrow's research division. Arya's eyes locked with Paul's. They're hunting you specifically. Project Chimera, Paul whispered. I've never heard of it. The communication channels suddenly switched to a new voice, this one speaking the clicking tonal language of the Volpe. Arya's ears flattened against her head. As she listened, what are they saying? Paul asked. Though echoes of understanding rippled through their connection, High Command has issued a capture order for me by name. Arya's voice was hollow with shock. They know about the blood transfer. They're calling it the first successful integration. She swallowed hard. My commander, she says this fulfills the parameters of something called the Ascension Protocol. Paul's comp beeped. He glanced down at the readings, then ran a more comprehensive scan over himself. His expression darkened. My blood has changed on a cellular level, he reported. The genetic structure is reshaping itself. Arya performed a similar scan on herself. Mine, 2 human and Volpe genetic markers coexisting in both of us. Genetic anomaly, Paul repeated the transmission's words. They didn't want me for my medical skills, they wanted my blood. But why? A sharp pain lanced through Paul's temple. Simultaneously, a floor panel, the corner of the room, flickered with light. Both of them turned toward it. As one, did you activate that? Arya asked. Paul shook his head, approaching cautiously. It responded when I felt that pain, almost like its key to your genetics. Arya finished, the understanding flowing between them. They knelt beside the panel and Paul placed his palm on the surface. The screen illuminated, displaying a classified Federation research file. Subject 57 Valerian Paul, genetic profile triple recessive marker. Present compatibility rate with Project Chimera 99.7%. Notes: subject unaware of genetic significance. Monitor, but do not inform. Essential for Phase 3 trials. Paul scrolled through the file, anger building. They've been monitoring me since basic training. Everything, my assignment to the Medical Corps, my deployment to Traxa. It was all orchestrated. Arya placed her hand beside his on the panel, and the display suddenly shifted, splitting to show both Federation and Volpe research data side by side. The Volpe have been searching for compatible human donors for decades. She read horror dawning in her eyes. My assignment to this sector wasn't coincidence either. The truth crashed over them, both 2 military powers secretly working toward the same goal, creating the perfect hybrid soldier. Through blood fusion, thousands of failed attempts, resulting in deaths on both sides. Paul and Ara were meant to be captured, separately studied, their blood harvested not for peace but for weapons development. They never told either of us, Paul said bitterly. We were just genetic material to them the building shook as. An explosion sounded in the distance, much closer than the previous night's battle through their strengthening bond. A new ability emerged, a shared awareness that extended beyond the station walls. They could sense multiple teams converging on their position, Volpe Special Forces from the South Area. Reported the knowledge simply there in her mind, and human extraction team from the East Paul added experiencing the same phenomenon. They found us. Aria grabbed her gear. We need to move now as they prepared to flee. Another wave of pain hit Paul stronger than before. Aria gasped, feeling it echo through their connection. The intensity dropped them both to their knees. What's happening to us? Paul gritted through clenched teeth. Aria's eyes widened as she looked at him. Your eyes. Paul touched his face, then looked at his reflection in a darkened screen. His pupils had changed shape, becoming slightly more vertical-like. Aria's the transformation. The legends warned about Aria, whispered it's happening to both of us. The extraction happened too quickly for resistance. One moment, they were fleeing through dense undergrowth. The next, surrounded by a Volpe Special Operations team, moving with precision that even their enhanced reflexes couldn't counter. Stun weapons fired, and darkness claimed them. Paul awoke, strapped to an examination table, the sterile environment and humming equipment, marking it clearly as a research facility. Through their bond, he sensed Aria nearby, unconscious but unharmed. The human awakens. A female Volpe voice noted clinically. Paul turned his head to see a slender Volpe in a medical uniform, approaching her, silver streak fur indicating greater age than Aria's. You must be Dr. Neria, Paul said, knowledge flowing from his connection with Aria. The doctor's ears twitched in surprise. The Neuralink is stronger than our models predicted. She made notes on a transparent tablet. Can you access her memories as well? Paul remained silent, unwilling to reveal the full extent of their capabilities. Cooperation would benefit you both. Dr. Neria continued, checking his vital signs. 17 previous human Volpe transfusion attempts resulted in fatal rejection. Your survival alone is unprecedented and valuable to your weapons program. Paul countered. Dr. Neria's ears flattened momentarily before she regained her clinical detachment. Project Ascension has broader applications than merely warfare. A groan from nearby signaled Aria's return to consciousness. Paul felt relief flood through him, stronger than the situation warranted. Their emotional connection was deepening. Paul Aria called, unable to see him from her position. I'm here, he responded, pushing reassurance through their bond. Dr. Neria watched their interaction with fascination. Remarkable, the empathic linkage functions across distances. She moved between their tables. Previous subjects required physical contact to maintain any connection. Previous subjects. Aria repeated bitterly, how many of my people have you sacrificed for this research? Fewer than the humans have sacrificed of theirs. Dr. Neria replied evenly, but that is irrelevant now. You two represent the culmination of decades of work. She activated a holographic display between their tables. See for yourselves what makes you unique. The display showed microscopic imagery of cells, human red blood cells, transforming, adapting to Volpe physiology, while maintaining their original function. Medic Valerian possesses a triple recessive genetic marker found in less than 0.001% of humans. Dr. Nara explained this marker creates blood cells capable of adaptive reconfiguration without losing core function. Another image appeared. Ara's genetic structure with Paul's altered cells integrating seamlessly, and Scout Aria lineage traces to the ancient Vessel clan, whose genetic memory capacities were thought extinct in modern Volpe. Together, you created what neither of our species could achieve alone, true symbiotic integration. Through their bond, Paul felt Aria processing this information, connecting it to childhood stories of her ancestry. The Vessel clan, she murmured, my grandmother's bloodline. Dr. Neria nodded, sacred blood carriers according to our oldest traditions. Now we understand it was a genetic predisposition for Xene Compatibility, Paul tested his restraint subtly. So what happens now you extract? Our blood until there's nothing left crude, but essentially correct Dr. Neria. Admitted the high command, require samples, to replicate the process. It won't work, Arya interrupted. The bond isn't just biological, she hesitated, finding no scientific term for what they'd. Experienced neural, emotional, spiritual Paul finished their thoughts, aligning Dr. Nara's expression hardened. Superstition, the genetic material, is what matters. She turned away to prepare. Extraction equipment, unaware of the silent communication flowing between her subjects through their strengthening. Bond, Paul and Arya coordinated without words, 3 guards outside Arya's. Thoughts came clearly. Extraction equipment, running on isolated circuit. Paul observed medical knowledge merging ing with Arya's tactical assessment. On my mark, Arya projected, focusing on the restraint mechanism. She'd been studying 321 simultaneously. They flexed against their restraints with precisely calculated force, exploiting a design weakness. Arya had identified the clasps. Broke with twin snaps. Dr. Nera whirled as alarms blared, but she was too late, moving with perfect coordination. Paul and Arya subdued her before she could call for guards. The deeper connection they formed in captivity made them formidable, each anticipating and complementing the other's movements. Flawlessly, the research data, Paul said, gesturing to the computer terminal. We need it. Arya accessed the system with Dr. Neria's credentials, downloading everything about their condition, and the projects built around it. What they found horrified them both, evidence of dozens of failed experiment subjects who had died in agony when incomparable blood was exchanged. They knew the risks when they captured us. Arya whispered, images of suffering test subjects burning in their shared consciousness as they prepared to escape. Paul noticed Dr. Neria watching them with unexpected intensity. You don't understand what you've become, she said softly, what you could mean for both our species. For a moment, indecision flickered between them. Then alarms intensified as security forces responded to the breach. We understand enough to know we're not going to be lab specimens, Paul replied as they moved toward freedom. Their steps perfectly synchronized, 2 bodies moving as one. 3 days of evasion through Triss's unforgiving wilderness had pushed their enhanced bodies to the limit. They moved only at night, using their shared abilities to avoid patrols from both sides. The bond between them strengthened. With each passing hour, thoughts flowing more freely, emotions intertwining until distinguishing between them became increasingly difficult. There, Arya said, pointing toward lights flickering in a valley below New Harmony. Paul sensed hesitation in Hero. Sure, it's safe as anywhere can be. Her ears twitched toward distant sounds. It's a neutral settlement founded by deserters from both sides. Neither military enters. It would legitimize the concept of peace. They approached cautiously, their heightened senses scanning for threats. The settlement was a hodgepodge of Federation and Volpe architecture, surrounded by makeshift defenses. Guards stopped them at the perimeter, a human and Volpe pair working together, an unexpected sight after years of war propaganda. State your business. The human guard demanded. Sanctuary, Paul answered. Simply, the guards exchanged glances, nodding their bedraggled appearance and the unusual way they moved in perfect synchronization. You'd better speak to Jacob, the Volpe guard said finally. They were escorted through streets where humans and Volpe moved freely among each other. Children of both species played together in dusty alleys. Another reality. Neither military would acknowledge. The guards led them to a converted Federation command post where a tall, scarred human waited. Jacob Reeves had the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Interesting pair, he observed, studying them intently. Combat medic and Volpe scout, moving in step like you've trained together for years. His eyes narrowed. Or like your blood bonded. Arya's surprise echoed through their connection. How could you know that? A female Volpe emerged from the shadows behind Jacoby, her hand resting casually on his shoulder. Because we recognize the signs, she answered. What you two have achieved is rare. but not unique. Jacob gestured for them to sit. I was a Federation. Major Vel was a VPY battalion commander. We were both captured, both badly wounded. He shared a look with his Volpe companion, a desperate field medic. Tried an experimental treatment, blood fusion. Paul realized. Vel nodded. That was 15 years ago, before either government understood the potential or the requirements. We escaped before they could study us properly and founded this place. Aria concluded, pieces falling into place. New harmony began. As our hideout, Jacob confirmed. It grew as others questioned the war. For the first time since the transfusion, Paul felt true hope. Here was proof they could survive. What had happened to them? We need rest, he said, exhaustion finally catching up to him. After that, we need information. Both sides are hunting us, something about genetic markers making us especially valuable. Jobs expression darkened. They've restarted the programs. Then we'd heard rumors. V led them to private quarters, a simple room with provisions for both human and Volpe needs. Rest now, you're safe here. When the door closed behind their hosts, the pretense of strength they'd maintained crumbled. They collapsed onto the sleeping mats, every muscle aching from days of hyper-awareness and exertion. Paul turned to face Aria. Really seeing her for the first time since their escape, changes were becoming more apparent, subtle shifts in her features reflecting human influence. Ewan's, just as he had acquired more defined canines and slightly enhanced night vision. What's happening to us? He asked softly. Aria reached out her fingers, tracing the altered angle of his cheekbones. The simple touch sent waves of sensation through their bond, intensifying the connection. We becoming something new, she whispered. The attraction between them had been building since they first shared blood. At first, just the biochemical pull of their bonded cells seeking proximity, now evolving into something deeper. They'd been too focused on survival to acknowledge it, but here in this moment of safety, it became undeniable. Paul's hand covered hers against his face. Is this the bond, or is it us both? Aria answered, her voice husky. The bond opens the connection, but what flows through it comes from us. Their first kiss was like completing a circuit. Energy coursing between them, memories and sensations multiplying as they shared not just the present moment, but echoes of every touch they'd ever experienced. Boundaries dissolved as they surrendered to the intimacy. Their unique condition offered a closeness beyond what either species could know. Separately, in the aftermath, they lay entwined, their synchronized heartbeats gradually slowing. Physical union had deepened their bond exponentially. Now, they didn't just sense each other's thoughts, but could access them as easily as their own memories. So that's what the legends meant by becoming one, Aria murmured against his chest. Before Paul could respond, alarms shattered their moment of peace. Jacob's voice echoed through the settlement's communication system. Battle positions incoming. Joint Operation Federation and Volpe forces approaching from all sides. This is not a drill. They leapt up as one, instantly alert. Their sanctuary had been discovered, and with it, their only chance of a peaceful future. The attack never came. The joint forces established a perimeter around New Harmony, but made no move to breach the settlement's defenses. By morning, a tense standoff had developed. They're waiting for something, Jacob explained during the emergency council meeting. Both sides have deployed elite units, but they're holding position. They're waiting for us, Paul said, the certainty flowing through their bond. This is a containment operation, not an assault. Vel nodded grimly. You too represent something both militaries value more than this settlement. They're hoping you'll surrender to prevent civilian casualties. Then we should leave. Aria suggested immediately. Draw them away from these people. An elderly Volpe with silver-white fur and ceremonial markings raised her hand for attention. Matriarch Alara. Paul knew through Aria's memories, a spiritual leader among the Volpe refugees. Before you make such a sacrifice, you should understand what you carry within you, the matriarch said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. Despite its softness, it is not merely a biological curiosity, but the fulfillment of the Crimson Prophecy. V's ears flattened in surprise. Matriarch, those texts were declared heretical by the high command generations ago. Truth does not cease to be truth. Because power finds it inconvenient, Alara replied sharply, I was keeper of the ancient texts before the war, I know. Know what they contain, she turned to Paul, and Arya, come with me, there is little. Time they followed the matriarch to a small chamber beneath the settlement where artifacts from both human and Vulpi cultures had been preserved. She retrieved an ancient scroll from a secure container, the oldest record of the prophecy, she explained, carefully unrolling the delicate document. Predating even our first contact with humans, the text was written in ancient Vulp script, but through their bond, Paul could understand the flowing symbols as clearly as his native language. When blood of the stars meets blood of the earth, two become one, and one becomes many. Alara translated, her claw tracing the faded text. The joined blood will heal the divided stars. Arya's memories stirred childhood teachings, resonating with the words, I remember these stories. My grandmother would tell them during the Crimson Moon celebrations. Your grandmother was a vessel lineage keeper. Alara confirmed the genetic